Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. We will wait one more moment for a few more folks to join. We have a large audience this morning. I'm just giving another moment for folks to come on. Thank you for your patience. Okay, while our attendees are continue to log on, I'm going to get started with a few introductions. My name is Danny Seabright. I'm president of the US-UAE Business Council. Welcome to today's webinar on the Biden administration and the new Congress in the United States. We're honored to be joined on this webinar today with three very esteemed panelists associated with the law firm Akin Gump. The Honorable Joe Donnelly, former Democratic U.S. Senator from the great state of Indiana. The Honorable Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, former Republican Congresswoman from Florida. Mr. Geoffrey Verhoff, former Vice Chairman of the Republican National Committee's Finance Committee. We are also delighted to have over 300 registered guests for today's webinar, to include business executives, government officials, thought leaders from the U.S. and the UAE, and the wider region. This guest list includes friends and partners from the UAE Embassy in Washington, D.C., and the UAE Consulate General in New York, the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi, and the U.S. Consulate General in Dubai, economic development officials from several states, including Alabama, Florida, and Missouri, our partner and friend, the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington, and our partner and friend, the AmCham in Abu Dhabi. Ladies and gentlemen, this session will be recorded and on by video and will be posted on YouTube later. Normally, we have a lot of folks that like to log on and watch the session at their convenience. Attendees, please utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens for any questions you have for the panelists, and we'll try to work them in this short conversation that we're going to have this morning. I'd like to now introduce and to kick off the webinar to introduce Senator Joe Donnelly, who served on Capitol Hill for 12 years, including one term as a U.S. Senator and 3 terms as U.S. Representative. Joe now works, as I said, at Akin Gump, where he advises clients in the financial services, defense, and healthcare industries on a host of public policy and government-related issues. While serving in the Senate, Senator Donnelly served on a number of committees, including the Banking, Housing, Urban Affairs Committee, where he was ranking member of the National Security and International Trade and Finance Subcommittee, the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition and Forestry, where he was ranking member of the Commodities, Markets, Trade, and Risk Management Subcommittee, and the Armed Services Committee, importantly, where he was the ranking member of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee. He also served on the Special Committee on Aging. Senator Donnelly will speak, then I'll introduce Honorable Ileana Ros-Lehtinen and Mr. Verhoff for a few minutes of comments, and then we will go into discussion. Please, Senator Donnelly, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Danny, and thank you to everybody who is attending, to all of our friends in the UAE. The friendship between the United States and the UAE is strong, and I think that the Biden administration will continue to make that relationship just as strong or stronger, because the Middle East is a critical area for the United States. The UAE is a critical friend. I have been there a number of times, and on both Senate-related issues, congressional-related issues, issues related on the defense and security of the Middle East, and on behalf of Akin Gump as well. And I can tell you that across the board here in the United States, we feel that this is a very special relationship, and that this is a relationship that over the next 4 years with President Biden and Vice President Harris will be one that they pay very significant attention to. We'll also pay significant attention to the business development as well. What we see happening in the Middle East is really good things with the relationship between the UAE and Israel, and that I personally am also hopeful that the relationship between Qatar and the UAE will continue to get better and better and better, as the United States has significant military bases in Qatar. It's an important part of the Middle East, and also is an important part of making sure that we have security in the Middle East. The UAE has been a bulwark and a friend against Iran and the dangers that Iran presents in the Middle East also. I think you'll see the Biden administration be one that that you will like very, very much. It's an administration that is going to be hewing toward common sense, that will be not moving too far one way to the left or to the right, but using a fairly common sense plan to grow America. The focus right now is domestic. It is on COVID. It is on ending this COVID emergency. But as this old saying goes, we can do more than one thing at a time. And so the main and critical focus is to increase vaccine production, is to make sure that in public people are masked, that they are able to get shots as quickly as possible, and that we can end this scourge. That's what so much of the time and effort of this administration is going into now. But at the same time, we are going to be very, very focused on creating a safer world, reestablishing our traditional relationships with places like Europe, strengthening, our relationships with the UAE and throughout the Middle East. And so I expect that the next 4 years will be a time when America's economy will grow, when our friendships redevelop. In regards to the Iran deal, obviously that's a big issue. I voted for the Iran deal when I was in the United States Senate, and I did so because I wanted to make sure Iran would stop the enrichment of uranium, would stop heading toward a nuclear weapon. We've seen that they've begun enrichment again. I think there will be discussions to scale that back, to eliminate that, to remove the enrichment that's occurred, and to see what kind of an agreement can be put together. Ballistic missiles are a critical problem that we have with Iran, and I think that will be part of any discussions as well. So I look forward to a strong UAE United States relationship. I look forward to a strong 4 years in the Biden administration. I think our economy in the U.S. will grow. I think our economic relations with the UAE will grow. And so I am positive and optimistic.
Senator, thank you so much for your vote of confidence, as it were, in the U.S.-UAE relationship. That's very, very important to hear. And we're going to bank on that with you and others in the months and years ahead. I'd like to turn the floor, if I could, to dear friend, former U.S. Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who served for almost 3 decades as a member of Congress representing diverse areas in South Florida. Representative Ros-Lehtinen was the chairwoman emeritus of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on the Middle East and North Africa. In these roles, she led on pressing foreign policy issues, including championing the advancement of freedom and democracy for all, fighting Islamic extremism, supporting free trade agreements with a number of key countries, and imposing sanctions on human rights violators in Venezuela. Ms. Ros-Lehtinen was also critical in the US-UAE 123 civil nuclear agreement, and we really appreciate your leadership on that, Congresswoman, when you were in service. Long a friend of the UAE, Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Danny, and I echo Joe's remarks about our strong partnership with the UAE, and I'm very pleased to hear from him that he thinks that the Biden administration will continue those bonds. I think one of the best legacies that President Trump has left for us is great advancements in the Middle East. He doesn't get much credit, but he deserves it. These peace accords, the Abraham Accords with UAE, and then Bahrain and Morocco, and you have country after country establishing ties with Israel. I think that's a proud legacy of the Trump administration. I was disappointed with the Georgia elections because I like divided government. I think that it works best when you have both parties in control of one part of the government. But now we have total Democrat control of the House, of the Senate and the White House. So, but it's very tight. Republicans did very well in the elections in the House, and we'll see how it goes. In the Senate, it's 50-50. So, oh my goodness, what a tightrope for President Biden to walk. We wish him the best. As President Biden succeeds, our nation succeeds. So I'm a proud Republican, but I congratulate him and the vice president for a formidable race under very difficult COVID situations. And now let's hope that we can get a COVID package. Right now, some people are skittish about the price tag. And it's interesting to me that we had these years of President Trump getting these big ticket items, and my party didn't say a word about the deficit and the debt. And now we've got President Biden doing the big ticket items, and everybody's so concerned. Not everybody's a deficit hawk all of a sudden, but I hope we get a good COVID package. But I hope that it's targeted and it really goes to the people who need it on the Middle East. I'm glad that President Biden is going to continue that strong plan of President Trump, and I'm optimistic about bipartisan cooperation. I wish that Republicans had controlled the Senate, because that can put the brakes on too much of an ambitious Biden administration. But that's okay. 50-50 is pretty tight. So I'm looking forward to all of the negotiations and the drama. I loved serving in the House, like you said, 30 years, and it was never a boring day. And it's going to be really interesting. Now they've got the impeachment trial in the Senate, which we'll do in the afternoons, legislate in the morning and try in the afternoon. Oh my goodness. It's now I get to watch it as an outsider, Danny, and it's going to be a lot more fun. So thank you again. I'm always tuning in to the many great Zoom presentations of the US-UAE Business Council. Longtime fan, first time caller. So congratulations on always having great programs. Turn it back to you, Danny, so that Jeff can say a few words.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing more of some of the things that you talked about in the discussion, in the conversation. But I would like to give Jeff Verhoff a chance to speak. Jeff's worked at Akin Gump for 15 years, developing, implementing, and managing targeted strategies to further the interests of Akin Gump clients. He advises on a range of legislative and regulatory matters at state, federal, and international levels. His practice focuses on leveraging the intersection of politics and policy. Jeff worked for Senator William Roth, a Republican from Delaware, who served as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee during the last 3 years of the senator's career. Following that, he joined the RNC's finance team that supported President George W. Bush's successful re-election campaign. He was extensively involved in the past 5 presidential campaigns, as well as numerous House, Senate, and third-party efforts. Jeff, as a former working with former senator representative from Delaware, I'm sure you have a lot of stories that you could tell about President Biden. But let's go ahead and hear your thoughts on what's going on today in Washington with the new Congress and the White House.
Yeah, thanks, Danny, and thank you all for allowing us to do this. And a pleasure to follow the senator and congresswoman. I've been to the region. I had the pleasure of following them to the region, so I would follow them anywhere. It's interesting. We have, what strikes me today, and as I talk to folks, we really do have a historic opportunity. I think both parties, from a political and a policy perspective. And you referenced Delaware. I worked for Bill Roth and was around him quite a bit. It wasn't too long ago where a Republican and a Democratic senator really did work hand in glove together over the course of decades to get a lot done. And I think we have a historic opportunity as a country to get back to some of those normal times. And I think if we do, and you've already seen it a little bit, President Biden acts like a traditional president. You see it in the press briefing room if you followed the communications out of the White House. The Senate, I think, is going to be very much a body that tries to move legislation again, which requires tough votes on amendments, engagement with one another. I think you'll see the middle of the Senate come together to try to accomplish the president's call for bipartisanship and unity. And a very, very narrow House of Representatives is going to severely limit what the Speaker can do on bills coming out of the House where, majority rules. So we do have a really interesting opportunity to kind of revert back to the quote unquote good old days. It's not going to be easy, and the political forces on both sides are going to pull the leaders away and attempt to try to get them to go for the political win rather than the policy win most days. The only other thing I'll say is from an international standpoint, I think that's going to play into the Biden foreign policy agenda a lot. And the Middle East is a consequential, every president comes in and it's either we're going to focus on Latin America, we're going to focus on Asia, we're going to, even Biden's talked about re-engaging with the Europeans, which we don't usually hear about, but we also don't usually have the last 4 years like we've had. It strikes me that the Middle East is still going to dominate, whether it's fallout from the Abraham Accords and how we foster those new relationships, the United States relationship with Saudi Arabia, which I think is going to be an interesting thing to watch. And of course, how does this new administration treat Israel with the Iran question? All those things we can dig into, but what they do here in terms of whether they can work together or whether they can't, I think is going to bleed in to the foreign policy agenda very quickly.
Jeff, thank you. And we are starting to get some questions in the chat box. If attendees could just please put your questions there, we'll do our best to get to them. But Jeff, I want to key in and give Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen and Senator Donnelly a chance also to comment on the new Congress, its makeup, its leadership. I mean, you talked about this is a chance to move forward in a new constructive way again. Please, all three of you, say a little bit more about some of the personalities involved in play here and who's going to take the lead and how it's going to work, and give us a little bit of inside baseball here from your thoughts. Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen, you want to go first? Ladies first, and then we'll go Senator Donnelly.
Well, thanks so much, Danny. That is a great question. I think that in the House we have a little bit of a division happening, and you've seen it very clearly with Matt Gaetz being in Wyoming today to slam Liz Cheney, who voted her conscience and voted to impeach President Trump. That she was one of 10 Republicans who voted that way. How will Kevin McCarthy maneuver this very difficult minefield? And he said President Trump bears some responsibility, then walked that back a little bit, and now all Americans bear some responsibility. So he's gotten some pushback from his own conference. So I think people's votes should be respected. I don't think that people should be thrown out of their leadership position because of a vote of conscience. But this is a test of Leader McCarthy's leadership, and we'll see in the coming days how he handles that. Nancy Pelosi very firmly in charge. She always is, and so she's got a smaller majority than she was hoping for in this November. She didn't get the numbers that they wanted, so she can't roll out too ambitious of an agenda because it'll be hard to pass. She does have conservatives in her caucus, and then in the Senate, the relationship between Leader McConnell and Leader Schumer is going to be interesting to see. I think publicly they might spar more than they do in private. They have a good working relationship, but nobody knows the Senate better than Joe Donnelly. So I'm not going to step on that. But I think personalities are going to matter a lot. Different styles of leadership, different challenges that they face, and nobody has a clear-cut majority. So President Biden has to keep that very much in mind. He's got an ambitious agenda, but he's got to tone it down if he wants to have that agenda become law. Thank you, Danny.
Sure, but Senator Donnelly, President Biden, in my view, and I think has toned it down considerably. How will Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer and reaching with the House, Speaker Pelosi, how will they work together? And will they work together? Wait, you're in mute, Senator. You're in mute, Senator Donnelly.
Sorry about that.
No.
It reminds me, I think it might have been President Nixon, Jeff, who talked about peace through strength. And so I think that's the explanation here. And we've actually seen that over the last 4 or 5 days where Senator McConnell basically said, I'm going to shut the Senate down unless there's an agreement that the filibuster won't be touched. And so we went about 5 days where Schumer held the line and in effect called his bluff. And yesterday evening, Senator McConnell said he wanted it like very clear agreement in advance. And there is no agreement, but he's agreed to start the Senate back up again. And on Senator McConnell's part, he said, look, Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema said, we will not push for a filibuster. So I have my assurances now. But, you know, the thing about Mitch McConnell is he's really good at his job if you define his job as being maintaining power, maintaining maximum power for Republicans. And that's, you know, that's how Democrats see him, is that he's a wily leader who wants to maximize his power. But I think what's going to happen is there'll be pushback on the other side, and that if both are pushing with their maximum strength, if Senator McConnell understands that, you know, there is a line that he can't cross, then we can get somewhere. And I am hopeful that we can. You know, when you talk about the filibuster and the discussion of that, and that's something we can get into later, it's very technical, but I've always believed that, you know, I was never in favor, I'm not in favor of moving forward with it, but I'm also not in favor of taking it off the table because you take one of the cards out of your pocket, that you can ensure better behavior by making sure people stay focused on trying to do what's right. I think both in the Senate and the House, you'll see moderate policies because you won't have enough votes otherwise.
Thank you. Jeff, you know, again, keying on what you said earlier, do you see more Republicans crossing the aisle in both houses to support some of these more moderate policies to get the business of the country done?
Yeah, look, most of them that are there, and speaks to Republicans and Democrats, are there to get things done. So if you're a Mitt Romney, if you're a Susan Collins, if you're an Angus King, you know, you have an opportunity to get things done. And I think that whether it's you're planning for a re-election down the road, or you have 6 years left in your term and you've got a list of things you'd like to accomplish, you have a president that you have confidence you can deal with. You have a Senate that is the middle is quite workable. Yeah, I think a lot of people would go will take that opportunity. I mean, somebody said, and I agreed, you know, the only thing, and if we had won, we Republicans had won the Senate, I don't know that I would say this, but I'm in politics, so I can talk out of both sides of my mouth. You know, the only thing worse than being majority leader, minority leader in a 50-50 Senate is being majority leader. I mean, you can imagine if McConnell was 51-49, you know, he is contingent upon making sure in that scenario that the Collinses, the Romneys, and the Murkowskis don't drive the agenda and undercut him. And so I think, look, you have to look at Mitch McConnell over a long career and a real Senate tactician. What's he really trying to do? And I think you need to ask yourself that question in every fight that comes up. I think in the most recent filibuster fight, I totally agree with Joe. He was asking for something he knew he was never going to get. But if you go back 20 years, and I was in the Senate with Bill Roth, just leaving the Senate at that time, everyone thought Trent Lott cut a horrible deal because Republicans with Dick Cheney's vote had a majority in the Senate. And they thought Trent Lott gave up too much by populating the committees 50-50, by splitting the budgets evenly, by allowing the minority quite a lot. And one of the things I think McConnell was doing by asking for something that he knew he wasn't going to get was to make sure that Schumer didn't try to go back and get some of those things back for the Democrats. And of course, Schumer immediately said the deal 20 years ago should stand. So the Senate's a fascinating place, you know, as Joe can allude, to watch almost every day to figure out where we are from a policy and a political perspective.
And I'm just going to chime in here and say, although I agree with my pal Jeff about the Senate and folks wanting to get things done, I don't know that the House Republicans will go go along with the Pelosi agenda, because they are very fearful of a primary from their right flank, and they cannot afford to have a tweet come out saying that they voted with Nancy Pelosi 95% of the time. So I think that you will still get a lot of no votes from the House, because that will be the Nancy Pelosi agenda, and they'll balk at voting for big expensive bills, and then there's going to be immigration that's going to be thrown in, and you're going to have a lot of clean energy, some Green Deal type things. The House Republicans, I don't think, are going to budge, and they don't have the feeling that, oh, we need to get things done, because in their way of thinking, in their district, getting things done means voting with Nancy Pelosi. So the Senate's a different animal, but the House Republicans, Danny, I don't think you're going to get that kind of feeling. They want to get things done, but they want to do it in a more conservative manner, not the Nancy Pelosi way.
Danny, I think that, the point Jeff made is really on target, that in effect, what we saw this first week was almost like the opening gambits of a couple of poker players, that, they're both asserting they have more in their hand than they actually do. And so I think we're getting down to a realistic point now. And you may talk about reconciliation a little bit later, which is an obtuse process of its own, but that's how legislation might wind up getting done this year.
Thank you, Senator. And Congresswoman, thank you for making the distinction between the House and the Senate, because that's really, really important. Now I'm gonna,
Danny, can I tell you,
go ahead.
I'm a proud former member of the House and Senate, so I love them both.
Got it.
But the saying I always heard that describes it the best is that the Senate is more like one of these clubs that you have in town, like in Dallas, the Oilman's Club, or in Washington, the Metropolitan Club, with nice, it's quiet atmosphere and this and that. And the House is an all-night truck stop. So I think that if anybody ever wants to wonder technically how they work, that pretty well sums it up.
I will remember that, sir. Thank you so much.
Very true. Very true.
I'm gonna call a lightning round real quick. Just a yes or no. Does the Senate, do enough Republicans cross the aisle to vote for impeachment in the Senate? Senator Donnelly.
No.
Senator Donnelly.
They need 17. No way.
Okay.
I don't think so.
And Jeff.
Today, no.
Okay, and we heard from Ileana, so we know her view. Great. Okay. What are give me 3 or 4 or 5 of the top areas where Republicans and Democrats are gonna work quickly to cooperate on? Obviously, COVID broadly in general, we're going to find a way forward. But what are some other areas besides COVID relief and vaccine that you think there's going to be early agreement and we're going to make progress?
We'll start with Joe.
I would say, I think our traditional defense bill, the NDAA, I think on the defense side, you'll see significant progress. And I think you'll see outside of Iran, a significant agreement on a lot of Middle Eastern issues, also in regards to protection of our friends and neighbors, working together with our friends and neighbors. Infrastructure. I think that everybody understands that we desperately need to bring our nation into the 21st century on roads, on railroads, on airports, on so many things. And so we have definite infrastructure needs as well. The COVID part, as you said, also is critical. So those are a couple of ideas right off the top of my head.
And
I agree with Joe. COVID, most important, infrastructure. Every week in the Trump administration was going to be infrastructure week. We never got to it. That really binds people together. The defense bill, NDAA, things that they won't agree on, immigration, high cost of bills, Iran, executive actions that the president has taken, Republicans will be powerless to really undo. But that's he's got to be legislating through executive orders more and more, because outside of those few areas, I don't know that there's a lot that they can work on. The differences in numbers are just so tight. Sorry, Danny, I
No, no.
cut you off.
No. Jeff, do you agree with that? Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'll add three. China, both parties are very aligned on China, which will be interesting to see how that manifests itself. Big tech, I think both parties for different reasons kind of distrust. There's a growing distrust of big tech, and I think from a regulatory and a legislative perspective, that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And one that I don't really have the answer to, but trade. You know, Republicans have an opportunity to figure out if they are a party of free trade again. And the Biden administration, you could see them wanting to look at a multilateral trade deal in Asia and continuing free trade agreements, maybe with the UK, maybe with Europe. And without Trump in the White House, I think it frees a lot of Republicans' hands to go back home on trade.
And it is interesting what Jeff points out, right, Joe, about China. People were worried that whether President Biden would get too close to China. What we've seen is the rhetoric continues, fearful of China's intrusion into our technology infrastructure, fearful of being such a strong competitor for the U.S. So I'm feeling relief that when I see and hear those voices from the Biden administration being anti-China, not anti-China. I'm just trying to generalize it, but they're not going to play footsies with the Chinese regime, and I'm pleased about that. My dog. Sorry.
You're going to make my dogs bark.
That was actually me. I saw breakfast going by.
Those points are all really fantastic. Let's just a quick question, as Senator Donnelly, when you mentioned infrastructure, you made me think about your young intern, Pete Buttigieg, and let's just a quick question on the cabinet. Do all of Biden's picks get through, lady and gentlemen? Is there going to be any significant fight on any of them, or you think we're good to go? Will they change the tone in the new administration significantly? Any thoughts?
I do think that they all get through. There may be some, such as Neera Tanden at the Office of Management and Budget, that are more contentious. But I think overall they all get through. And what ensures that is you have 50 Democratic votes, that if there's a 50-50 tie, you have Vice President Harris, who will cast the deciding vote. Additionally, you have Republicans such as Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney, people like Rob Portman, who is now going to be retiring, which frees Rob up to be a little bit more of a free agent perhaps. But overall, I think that I think the cabinet choices will go through. So far, the numbers have been really strong. And the thing is, it's a cabinet that's reflective of America, both our diversity and throughout regions of the country. So I think that I think it'll be a fairly smooth process.
Agreed.
As we've seen in these past weeks, when Republicans were still in charge of the committees, they have approved the Biden appointees and they've gone over well. This week they're going to be approving a few more nominations as well. Certain posts are going to be controversial to not because of the person himself, but HHS is always a minefield. We've got abortion, you've got the Affordable Care Act. So Javier Becerra's nomination, we don't know how Republicans in the Senate will take that. But with that exception and the one that Joe points out, just because of the nature of the nomination and the fields that they cover, the jurisdiction, they might get more questions. So, but Republicans, you've seen Mitch McConnell has been going through the nominations and it hasn't been a problem.
Jeff, comment?
I don't disagree with anything said. The only thing I'll say as a counterpoint is history says they don't. Now, I can't point to the one that I think right now is in any trouble. So that's why I don't disagree with anything that they've said. But usually one or two fall by the wayside. And so that's why the hearings are important and kind of focusing on who these people are and what they want to do. And we'll see.
Okay. Before we turn to a little, talking about the U.S. role in the Middle East a little bit and how the new Congress and the administration will react. I have one question here. We can't leave this domestic discussion without talking about what happened on January 6th just a little bit. So in the chat box, efforts to censure Senators Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz due to their alleged role in January 6th insurrection. Where do those efforts go? And will they distract from what Biden wants to do with his legislation? Will the trial distract from what we want to get done with the legislation or not? Some quick thoughts. Senator?
I don't think it will distract at all because we have the ability to do more than one thing at a time. And so the trial will, I think it starts February 8th, and it is based on the president inciting an insurrection against the United States. Now, I will ask everyone who's watching this and all our panelists, whoever thought that a sentence like that could ever even be spoken? But I heard Senator Chris Coons this morning talking about it, and he said, here's why this is being brought up. Because words matter, that when the attack on the Capitol began, which resulted in 5 deaths, the death of a Capitol police officer, that the president, from all indications, was watching pretty pleased with himself. Second is that the president was repeatedly asked when it began to come out publicly, tell them to stop, tell them to leave the Capitol. He did not. Thirdly, the president was begged to release the National Guard. That did not happen. And so in addition to the actions that took place before the attack on the Capitol, the rally, those are the additional parts of it. So that is why there is a trial that will begin to take place on February 8th. But that trial will not hold up in any way, shape, or form the effort to reach up to 2 million vaccinations a day. President Biden has gone from saying 1 million a day. Now he's saying 1.5 million a day is the next target. The goal then after that is 2 million. So we can do more than one thing at a time.
And I agree with what Joe says. As an American and as a Republican especially, it sickens me to see my Republican Party associated with these rioters, these hooligans, these lawbreakers, inciting violence. And this is a really ugly time for our party, and we've got to stand up for our principles. We've got to take a stand. However, on the action taken against senators, of course, the Senate will decide what to do, but you've had what will happen? You don't really have Republican voices, moderate voices like Mitt Romney advocating to take action against these senators. So I don't think anything will come of it. It's more of a political statement, and those senators will have to answer to their constituents. But I am sickened by the obscene and unlawful actions. I am glad that all of those people are getting arrested and will be tried. And I hope that they get prosecuted to the fullest extent. We cannot allow this to happen ever again. That was just incredible when we saw those events unfolding. And the more we know about it, the more sickened we are. So unacceptable, obscene, horrific, a crime, and folks will be held accountable. But whether it's the Senate that will hold them accountable or the voters, and a lot has to do with the great pull that President Trump still has in our Republican Party. Will he maintain that pull in these coming years or not? Let's see what happens. But it's a truly interesting time, but for a very bad reason.
Here to both of you for those comments. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that or reinforce?
Just briefly, I wrote an op-ed shortly after the 6th calling on the president's impeachment conviction removal at the time and disbarment from future office. So I've been pretty clear on where I come, and I echo the comments of shock and disgust. Look, I think the two observations. When I said today the Senate doesn't vote to impeach, and I still think they probably don't vote convict. Something 8, Rob Portman might have been 9. The number could be as much as 10 or 11 Senate Republicans that are likely to never face their voters again. I think that's an interesting group to watch. And I think now that we're 3, 4, 5 weeks away, we'll be more than a month away once the trial gets going. The due process argument is interesting. The Republicans have successfully sought to delay this, to give the president an opportunity to mount a defense. There really is no defense, as we've talked about. But I think what the due process argument gives is the House impeachment managers an opportunity to lay out their case. And I think these last few weeks give them an opportunity to do a little bit more of an investigation to figure out what the case against the president is. And I'm anxious to see how that comes together. The only area where I'll slightly disagree with Joe, and I know the aspiration is to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Congress, oftentimes, no offense to the illustrious panel we have, can't do one well at a time. And part of that is the media. I mean, the media frenzy around the impeachment trial will be 24/7. Impeachment, impeachment, impeachment. And I think that's going to be a very difficult environment to also say to the American people, well, we're also doing COVID and we're also doing economic recovery. And I think it's going to bog the administration down. And that's not a criticism. It's a fact, not a problem.
Okay, I hear you. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. Let's turn a little bit to the Middle East and to the new U.S. role in the Middle East going forward. Ambassador Doug Silliman from the Middle East Institute asked a really important question for us to start this conversation. He says he's concerned about the politicization of U.S. relations with the Gulf Arab states, particularly on issues such as human rights, Yemen, and security cooperation and arms sales. Can you say a few words about how the Biden administration is going to deal with this partisan divide on the Gulf? Do you agree there's a divide on the Gulf as we get into the day-to-day and the work of this? I'm curious. Senator Donnelly, go ahead.
There's a divide on some issues, and on other issues, everyone is together. The Israeli UAE agreement, that's a great thing. And the opportunity for Qatar and the UAE and Saudi Arabia to work together again, that's a great thing. But there are disagreements on things like human rights, on the war in Yemen. And so those disagreements will continue. I don't in any way, shape, or form pretend to speak for the Biden administration or to tell you what they will do. Just this is my best opinion on that, is that there's significant concern about Yemen. There's significant concern about human rights. And those will play a larger role in Middle Eastern activity moving forward than they have during the Trump administration.
And I'm optimistic that that President Trump will continue the warm relations that President Trump established with our Arab allies. It was long past time that we recognize how pivotal a role these nations have played in establishing regional stability, progress, modernity. We don't have a one-size-fits-all foreign policy, and we never have. No administration has. What works with one country may not work with the other. But what we are always focused on is making sure that we build allies and partnerships with countries that value human rights, that value the same principles that we stand for. But it does not mean that we can only deal with democracies. Many Arab countries, of course, as we know, don't have that kind of a democracy, but they stand up for human rights, for making sure that they treat the folks in their country in a fair way. And I think countries like the UAE and countries like our Arab partners are the model. And we have now a time of tranquility, except for the skirmish that's going on with Yemen, and that's a humanitarian debacle. But except for that, it's a time of peace. It's a time of reconciliation, of building strong accords, of getting their economies going, helping them deal with COVID, because COVID is a worldwide pandemic. It doesn't recognize borders. So I'm optimistic that that will continue. And I haven't liked that many in the press have looked at our relations with Arab neighbors as arms sales and quid pro quo. That's not it at all. And I think it's a bigger issue, a bigger deal, and it's important for U.S. security to making sure that we have those stable relationships with our partner nations. So may it continue, and I'm optimistic that the House and the Senate will see it that way as well. Jeff?
Yeah, look, I think this is an area where President Biden has an opportunity to maybe differentiate himself from President Obama, although he was vice president in that administration. Joe Biden was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was a leading internationalist in the United States Senate for 36 years, somebody who knows the world and knows how important our alliances are. And so I have a lot of faith that Joe Biden, the last administration, on some days, it looked more like, and this is just to give you a sense of how different it's going to be, it looked more like a game show where you would have a Gulf state or an ally come and what did they win today, Johnny? And Biden is not going to have an administration like that. It's going to be, as Ileana and Joe said, human rights is going to be a lot more on the forefront. But I think he will resist allowing our relationship with Israel to be politicized, the kind of the sibling spats in terms of, who are you favoring more in the region. I think he's going to try to tamp that down and have a broader overarching strategy for the region, which will get us back to kind of the status quo ante. Where does it leave us with, and will it be successful? Too early to tell, but I do think we're going to get back to a little bit of normalcy here.
And I'll just add on just a second with what Jeff has said about the treatment of Israel under the Obama administration. That was one of the lowest points in modern history, with an ally that sticks with us at the UN, that shares our principles on democracy, the rule of law, you name it. That's Israel, and yet Israel's was treated so shabbily, and it became a clash of personalities. And our relationship with our neighbors and with our allies has to be much bigger than personalities. It'll be interesting to see how President Biden deals with Egypt. As you know, they've had some difficulties there. So I think that's where maybe we'll see President Biden stand out a little bit more. Let's see what happens with the U.S.-Egypt relationship. That's going to be an interesting dynamic.
Hey, Danny, I would just like to follow up. Ilia is my dear friend, but I really disagree with her on defining the U.S.-Israel relationship with President Obama. It takes two to tango. And Bibi Netanyahu, on his best day with President Obama, really disliked President Obama. And so, to work together, everybody has to pitch in. And I think that the United States relationship with Israel has always been strong, continues to be strong, that there was significant disagreement with some of President Netanyahu's policies, or Prime Minister Netanyahu's policies, even within his own country, even within his own security agencies. And so don't ever forget that Israel received long-term financial guarantees during the Obama administration. And so I think that President Obama was the president of the United States and fulfilled that role with a great ally, but also looked out for our country as well.
Thanks, Senator. I recall a trip by then Vice President Biden to Israel, where some might say he wasn't quite treated so well either on the ground while he was in Israel. But in any event, let's move on from that real quick to the arms sales. And this issue of politicization. Senator Menendez is not happy, and probably rightly so, with the way the Trump administration pushed through some of these sales before they left office, literally signing the deal with the UAE hours before he left office on the morning of January 20th. But nonetheless, these sales are really critical and important to bolster a close friend and ally. So how is the new Congress going to sort of treat the yin and the yang of this, if you will, going forward, given how some on the Democratic side were treated, but yet how important and critical these things are to our relationships?
Well, I think that for sure that the Trump administration did not perhaps roll it out in the best way, and the classified briefings, from what I've heard, press reports, open press reports, did not give the information that the senators wanted. But that's true in most administrations, that the briefings make you question more, and you want more information. However, these arms deals, they were very important for U.S. national security. It was important for the UAE to have these kinds of aircrafts, for example, and they build U.S. jobs. You know, this is not a job killer arms deal. This is good for the U.S. economy. It has jobs for U.S. workers, and it's a protection, national security protection for the U.S. to make sure that the UAE can defend itself from a potential attack from Iran. Iran continues to be the troublemaker of the region, continues to try to divide all of our allies, and is responsible for any of the bloodshed that is occurring. Iran is a problem, and I hope that the Biden administration sees it that way. I know that they said that they're going to get back to the nuclear accord, but we've got to be conscious of the fact that they are breaking many of the stipulations, if not all of the stipulations of the Iran deal. And so I am worried about getting cozy with Iran, and I'm worried about any feeling in the Senate to not approve future arms sales, which are good for the U.S. economy and good for the U.S. national security.
Senator?
Danny, I think that these arms sales are important for the UAE military, and especially in regards to Iran. And I think that some of the objection in the arms sales was more about human rights and about Yemen, that there was an effort to say, get that fixed before we move forward with this. But the UAE military and the United States military are great partners and work together on a constant basis and have common friends and common enemies like Iran, that what we're trying to do is, throughout the region, make sure that Iran isn't spreading terrorism. And so we want to make sure that the UAE has a strong and vibrant military. And I think a lot of the additional words around these arms sales occur because of Yemen and human rights issues.
Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was alluding to a little earlier, the kind of the corrosive effect of regional politics by what deal you can make. I mean, I think it was natural for the former president to kind of operate that way. But I think when you look at the diminution of the importance of human rights, which is traditionally such an important aspect for policymakers here, you see the competing nature of how different players in the region were trying to one up one another or get their deal in place. I mean, I honestly think, do I think Bob Menendez at the end of the day is against the UAE arms deal? No, I don't. I think the confluence of everything else that was layered on top of it and the timing required that he kind of play the loyal opposition. But I think if we can get back to normal, and clearly the current president isn't going to act like the former president as it relates to arms deals in particular, I think it's going to help align policymakers more in the traditional role that we're used to.
And I agree with Jeff. I think Bob Menendez was very much against the process. And yes, he had questions about the legitimacy of the arms deal itself, but it was a lot about the process. And I think that as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I think that we will see the Bob Menendez that we know and love, a very strong proponent of U.S. relations with our Arab neighbors. So I don't think we have to be worried about that from Bob Menendez.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. From your lips to God's ears, as they say on that one, for sure. I want to. We have 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want to do a quick lightning round on Iran here at the end to wrap it up from a foreign policy perspective. Your thoughts on how the Biden administration works with Congress, works with our friends and allies in the region to deal with the problems posed by Iran going forward in the next year. Will we get back to a JCPOA of some sorts? The Iranians have already said that the issue of having the Gulf states and Israel at the negotiating table is something that they just won't tolerate in order to get back to negotiations with us. And as you all know, that was one of the biggest criticisms coming out of the last deal, that we didn't have our Gulf Arab allies at the table, who live literally right next door to this menacing threat on their borders. So quick, in a minute each, if you could give me a few words on your thoughts on Iran. Senator, you first, and then down the horn here.
I think there's a desire to stop the enrichment that's going on in Iran right now of, the enriched uranium material. I think there's a desire to try to get back to some sort of deal that would prevent that. But additionally, the discussions that you mentioned about having our Gulf neighbors be part of helping us make the right decision, having the input of our Gulf neighbors in making the right decision. Then additionally, the ballistic missiles that Iran has been continuing to develop also need discussion and need to have a decision made. And so I think that there's a tonal change in that. How do we get to a better place? How do we keep the region safe? And how do we stop the enrichment? And, there's a potential deal there, but, it won't be exactly what the past deal has been.
And I think that whatever President Biden decides to do on the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, he'll have to do it by himself. I don't think that he can be able to count on the Senate going along with him. Or, of course, the House doesn't have too much to do with that, but he will have to do it himself. And I think his biggest stumbling block is not going to be the House or the Senate. It will be the Iranians, because they like to appear that they're in favor of this or that, but they want to do it themselves. And even though Joe Biden is like the eager Boy Scout trying to walk the Iranians to cross the street, the Iranians are this the bully who says, "Hey, I don't even want to go to cross the street." So the Iranians themselves will be his biggest problem, not the House or the Senate. And as we know, the JCPOA was not a deal because the president did not take it to the Senate for a vote, because he wouldn't have really had the votes. It would have failed. So there's great disagreement about Iran and what's next.
Jeff, you get the last word on that.
Yeah, I sure hope we don't roll back. I mean, I think one of the singular achievements of the Trump administration, in my mind, is the maximum pressure campaign and what that brought about from a policy and a regional policymaking perspective. Nothing was perfect, but looking back, I sure don't have that many complaints about the way the region looks today and the prospects for greater peace, greater partnership, greater prosperity, not only for people of the Middle East, but for those who they're allied with. And, I think there's no deal to be made with Iran that is going to get us to a better place than we are today. We have a lot of work to do, but looking back, it wouldn't be, in my book, a prescription for anything going forward.
It's President Trump's best legacy, the Middle East, no doubt. And getting out of the Iran deal was sweet.
Wow, those are great. Those are very powerful statements to end this on, and I appreciate it very, very much. With regard to looking forward, we will the UAE's mission to Mars, which is called HOPE, is going to arrive at the Red Planet right around the second week in February, so 2 weeks from now. And we will be hosting Her Excellency Sarah Al-Amiri, the UAE Minister for Advanced Technologies, in a conversation on the HOPE mission and STEM in the UAE and possibility of cooperation with the U.S. going forward in these areas. That will occur on February 1 at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. UAE time. We really look forward to hosting that discussion. Congresswoman, Senator Jeff, we really, really, really appreciate your time today. This was really enlightening, and we really appreciate the partnership with Akin Gump as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny, and I'm glad you shaved that beard off.
Thanks, Danny.
Take care, everyone. Have a